Do you want to bust your sales quota? Do you want to join the ranks of top 1% sellers? The Top 1% Sellers podcast gives you the insights and the tools to help you achieve your sales greatness. The podcast features sales and services professionals, leaders, and experts to give you the edge you're looking for. Here's your host, Ash Sadiq.
Hey everyone, this is the Top 1% Sellers webinar series, and today's webinar is with an amazing guest, Jim Cathcart, who you'll get to know more about in a few minutes. I just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware this is a series of webinars, and we have more coming up in February. And so far, we've actually spoken to people like Jeffrey Hazlett, Tim Sanders, Lewis Sheff, and a number of other amazing thought leaders when it comes to becoming a top seller. And that is really the focus of our conversation today as well. We're going to be talking to Jim Cathcart, as I mentioned, and I will give you a brief intro into Jim's background before we get started here. So Jim has been chosen as one of the top sales influencers across a number of years, and even in 2017. By Top Sales World magazine based in London and Paris. In December 2012, Jim Cathcart was inducted into the Sales and Marketing Hall of Fame in London, England. And in addition to this, to his existing Speaker Hall of Fame listing for 5 years in a row, Jim has been selected as one of the top 5 speakers on sales and service in an online survey of over 14,000 people. And the number of accolades and the number of top sellers that Jim has is definitely unlimited. I'm going to actually give him an opportunity to share with you some of his background as we go through the conversation. We're going to be doing it in 3 segments, and we're focusing more on how to succeed in 2017. We'll look at top seller behaviors. We'll look at how to stay motivated. And then we'll cap it all up by focusing on how you bring all this together in how you communicate and how you present. So with that, Jim, welcome. Wonderful to have you here with us at the Top 1% Sellers Academy webinar series.
Thank you, Ash. It's great to be a part of this, and I love the title, Top 1% Sellers Academy. That's amazing. You know what? In 2017, I think we've got an enormous opportunity in front of us, especially this year, because this is a year where we're changing administrations and politics and all that. But we're also changing. There's like a change in the collective mindset nationwide and maybe even worldwide. Yes. People are starting to believe in possibilities again. People are starting to look at removing restrictions and regulations and barriers that have inhibited us. And there's an encouragement of business, a celebration of success that's beginning to develop. Yes. And when you celebrate successes, you get more successes. When you discourage celebrations, you say, no, I know you did real well, but don't make a big deal about it. Shh, don't tell anybody. And maybe others will succeed, and in the meantime, they won't feel bad because you succeeded more than them. Yes. Well, that's just silly, and it doesn't work psychologically. Yes. I believe that you and I and our viewers are in for an enormous opportunity boom. There's going to be an achievement explosion starting in 2017 like we haven't seen in many, many years. And the reason is that in times of tight economy or recessionary economy or that sort of thing, yes, needs don't go away. The needs are still there. It's kind of like if you put off eating, you're still hungry. Yes. You still need the nutrients. And you may put off eating for quite some time, yes, but when the meal's served, you're going to go up there and start chomping down on everything available, right? Exactly. So I think that's what we're going to see, and there's a huge opportunity right now to start making some big, exciting advancements real fast.
Yeah, I love how you started with it, Jim, because I think a lot of people are thinking of all the ramifications of a new administration coming in with a new president. And to your point, maybe some people are thinking, oh, our buyers are going to be cautious and pausing and wondering. but I love your own viewpoint on this, that the fact that it really is going to be driven by how you pursue what people need, because these needs are not going away, as you said.
Absolutely. And that's it doesn't matter about politics.
Yes.
What matters for the purpose of what we're doing here today with the Top 1% Sellers Academy is business is being encouraged. When business is encouraged, sales flourish.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I know you talk about success velocity, and I think, as you and I were prepping here, given the fact that we are in January, I'd love for us to really think about how a lot of sellers today are planning for the rest of the year. And we want to sort of maybe cull out from the segments that we're going to cover the particular pieces that will help in that preparation, so that they are actually going out the gate very, very strong and being able to bust through all the walls that could be standing in front of them. So let's start with focus on top sellers' behaviors. And I think you've been across a number of years and with many audiences and many organizations you've worked with. Maybe we can pick on the top list that you consider your own top 5, top 10 top seller behaviors, and we can maybe start with what you think is the most important.
Okay, well, let's talk for a second about what is velocity. As you mentioned sales velocity, and that's something I talk about is success velocity, which is larger than just sales. Every individual has a sort of a natural velocity. Now, velocity is not speed. Velocity is rate of advancement toward an intended target. So if you, for example, are going 200 miles an hour in a circle and you're not in a race, your velocity is 0, but your speed is 200 miles per hour. Because you're not getting anywhere. You're just going in a circle, right? But if you're going 60 miles an hour toward a target, your velocity is 60 miles per hour, right? So you would beat the person going 200 miles an hour in a circle.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. So velocity, to increase your sales or success velocity, what you need first is to know, what do you want? What's your target? What are you trying to accomplish? Well, more sales. That's kind of like, I want health, wealth, and freedom to do what I want to do. Well, so does everybody else that's ever been born. That's not a goal. That's a general condition desired by humans, right? So what's your goal? And the reason I ask is, until you can answer that succinctly, you're probably not going to make much progress. So number one, top sellers, and I've interviewed thousands of top sellers over the years. I've done 3,000 presentations to different audiences all around the world in a multitude of industries. I mean, really, over 2,000 different organizations over my 40-year career as a professional speaker and trainer. So I've worked with every kind of group under the sun. And I've learned a little about their industry in each case. And I always go to the people like yourself who are at the top of their game in that field. And I say, hey, Ash, what do you do? And I get their stories. And it's interesting how the way they describe what they do is different from what the rank and file describes. Number one, they always know what they want. So they've always spent a lot of time thinking about, what do I want? More sales. Well, what does that mean? How many more sales? And what number? How do I quantify it? And if I got more sales, why is that important to me? Well, I'd have more money. Well, what does more money mean? Well, I'd have more freedom. What does more freedom mean to you? Well, I'd be able to do what I want to do. Well, what do you want to do? Now we're back to the basic question.
Correct.
Let's talk about what you want in your life, in your world, in your business, and then let's see how you can get that by being more targeted with what you're doing as a salesperson. Number two, top salespeople, top 1%ers, and the top 1% of the top 1%. In many cases, I've had the chance to meet with the, like, $1 Million Roundtable would call it, the top of the table people. That's in the insurance industry. Those people, they say, well, first off, I'm willing, this is them talking, not me. I'm willing to change me in whatever ways I need to in order to achieve my goals. They say, well, I'm not going to change who I am. No, but you can change how you express who you are. In other words, you can change your habit patterns. You can change your mindset and your thought patterns. And if you look at it, I've got a model that I use in many of my seminars that I call the chain of choices.
Yes.
And it's a causation chain where this causes this to be different, causes that to be different, and on up the scale. So it starts with mindset, the way you think about selling. What's the purpose of selling? What are you trying to do? Okay. And let's assume that I think the purpose of selling is to make a sale, to get revenue. And you think the purpose of selling is to make somebody's life better at a profit. Well, you're going to be much more compassionate, much more helpful, much more willing to stick with it than I am, because I'm just going to be looking for the money. And if I don't see it, I'm going to go somewhere else. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So mindset affects actions. So you choose your actions based on the way you think about what is selling. What am I trying to do here?
Yes.
How do I think about the customer? Do I respect him or her? Do I admire them and want to be of service to them? Or do I see them as somebody that has my money in their pocket?
Exactly.
Right? And that's the old style of selling. I was literally taught that years ago as a young salesperson. There's a bunch of people out there, Jim's got our money in their pocket. Now you go get it.
You do.
And so that was all about me manipulating people.
Figuring it out. Yeah.
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 So the next thing is your mindset influences your actions. Your actions become your habits. Your habits are how you're known. That's your reputation.
Yes.
So your habits determine your reputation. How do you change your reputation? Change your actions and keep changing them until they become new habits. Then you have a new reputation. Okay, one more.
Yes.
Your reputation determines who's willing to spend time with you and who wants to avoid you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so your relationships are a reflection of the reputation you've earned.
Yeah.
Change your reputation, you've changed the number of people that are willing to open their doors to you. And when you look at the relationships that are open to you, you can see the size of the future you could have if your reputation's bad, if your habits are bad, if your actions are wrong, if your mindset is sour, then your future shrinks to accommodate that cynical or pessimistic mindset.
Yes.
So optimism's not a good idea. Optimism is the only way to succeed. You say, well, I'm not going to say, yes, I can when I know I can't.
Yeah.
That's not what optimism's about.
Absolutely.
There's three mindsets. Optimism, pessimism, and those that say, I'm not an optimist, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist, right? Well, a realist is simply a pessimist who won't admit it. Everybody's got to look at reality, but the filter you look at it through makes all the difference. If I say, here's the situation, there's no hope, then I'll give up. Yes. Or if I say, look, I know there's possibilities, but I mean, look at it. There's no hope. So I got to be realistic. I'm still pessimistic about it. The optimist says, man, what a mess. Realistically, we got a challenge on our hands. Somewhere there's a solution. Let's find it.
So you're saying that I think what you're saying to a lot of people listening in, when you want to take a look at the relationships you have, whether they are good or bad, you're going to have to sort of backtrack all the way to your mindset, because
absolutely
the you have today are a reflection of what your actions and habits are actually, the kind of relationships they are creating.
Yeah, and your mindset's a reflection of what goes into your mind. So the people you hang out with, the way they think is going to influence and color the way you think.
Yes.
The books you read, the sources you go to online, the websites, the podcasts you listen to, the Top Sellers Academy, those sort of things. If you control, and of course all of us do control what goes into our mind, exactly, by choosing what we pay attention to, since you control what goes into your mind, you control the mindset itself to a large extent.
Absolutely. Choose
the one that works, not the one that you're comfortable with.
Yes. Yeah, I think you made an amazing connection now between the relationships a sales professional has and the way they think and how they come across.
Absolutely.
Because to drive an amazing 2017, a relook into the relationships then means also a relook into the mindsets that each one of them has.
Yeah, and let me take that word relationship and expand it a bit.
Yes.
This is the drill down, where we unfold the whole thing.
Yes.
Relationship, I'm the author of the book Relationship Selling, as you're aware, the original author of that from back in the 1980s, and I've rewritten it many times since. Well, when I stand up in front of an audience, I'll often say, what's a relationship? And they say, and they throw out things. It's connections. It's people it's what, and nobody has the same answer as the next person.
Yes.
So I said, all right, I will come up with an answer. Mm-hmm. Here's the definition of a relationship in a business context that I think works best. It is a direct connection between people, not between organizations, between people. You don't really have a relationship with an organization. Yes. A direct connection between people in which value is exchanged. Because if there's no exchange of value, there's really no relationship. You might have a superficial transaction. Good morning, how are you? Fine, how are you? We go on about our day. Or, hey, is this the way to San Jose? Yes, it is. Okay. That's a transaction. That's not a relationship. So a relationship is where value is exchanged in that direct connection. All right. Most people are not intentional about their relationships. As a matter of fact, most people aren't even aware of what all their relationships are.
Yes.
So one of the exercises I'll often lead people through is an assessment of all their existing relationships. Who do I know? Who do I communicate with every week or every month?
Yes.
So that there's an ongoing connection there. And am I giving any value to that? And am I getting any back? Or am I just throwing this down an empty hole? So look at all your relationships, and then one at a time, take a look at which ones matter a lot and determine what's your inner circle of primary relationships.
Yes.
And on each of those, spend some serious time asking yourself, how can I give more value to this? And value, this is important, is only determined by the recipient, not by the giver.
Yeah, and
you can't know for sure what's valuable until they say, yes, Ash, that's what I want from you.
Yes. Makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And I think when you think of this, especially now, there's a lot of focus on customer success. Mm-hmm. And you hear that term now a whole lot more than you would hear what we used to hear in terms of customer service. Now there's a much more longer term relationship because people, especially in the technology field, they are buying a service. They're no longer buying technology boxes.
Right.
It's no longer a transaction where here is your network or here is your software and I'm gone. There's much more long-term relationship. And a lot of enterprise sellers who used to sell in this old model are now being asked to be relationship sellers a whole lot more because there is the service component of it and ensuring the success. And I know you talk in your book about this whole concept of assuring, which is really tied to customer success. And I'd love for you to sort of talk about how that evolved in your own mind.
Absolutely. So I look at the steps in the sales cycle as preparation, targeting the right people in the right ways, connecting with those people, head and heart, so they trust you as well as respect your expertise. Yes. So preparation, targeting, connecting, assessing their needs, understanding what it is you could do for them or how you could help them, right? Yeah. Solving their problem, that's where you give them the sales presentation, show them how you can help. And then confirming their commitment to buy.
Yes.
So it's not closing anything. It's not an end of a sale. It's the beginning of a service, right? It's the beginning of a commitment to each other. And so even if you're selling a one-time item, still you've made a commitment to them that this item will remain valuable after the purchase.
Exactly.
And they've made a commitment that their money will be spendable. You can actually cash that check. It's not going to bounce, right? Exactly. So it's got repercussions beyond right now. Yes. And then after you confirm the sale, then you assure that they're satisfied with what they got. And then the final step in selling is managing sales and managing yourself. Yes. So those are the components of what I call the 8 skill sets or competencies in the sales cycle. So assuring customer satisfaction starts with anyone?
Yes.
Mindset. Here's the mindset.
Yes.
The purpose of selling is to make people's lives better. at a profit.
Yes.
Because if you don't make a profit, you can't keep on doing it. So you've got to make a profit, and profit's an honorable thing. It's appropriate and needed, and it's something you should want to be there for everybody, okay? But the purpose of selling is to make their life better. And if you can't make their life better, don't sell to them. Go sell to somebody else.
Exactly.
But let every day be a day of helping people with your products and services. So get up in the morning and say, who can I help today? And some of them won't buy, but you might be able to help them with an idea and get a referral from them, or a tip or something that leads you to even greater sales.
Yes. And I think, given that environment, then they have to position it as, I'm not gone after we get this commitment. I'm going to be with you for the long term to make sure that solution you bought is really delivering the value.
Yeah. Even if you're not, if your company is, and someone else handles that servicing of the account, you've still got the implied commitment because you're the one that got them to say yes.
Exactly. Terrific, Jim. Perfect, Jim. We're back now. And what I'd like us to do is to explain to people why your handbook, your motivation handbook, had sneakers on the cover of the book. I'd like us to kind of tell us the back end story for that.
Well, I've been a motivational speaker for 41 years now. And one of the things that I tell about in my book, The Self-Motivation Handbook, is how I motivated myself to change from being basically a nice guy who was a loser and fat to a guy who's fit and an achiever. And the way I did it was I started going to group discussions and reading books and listening to recordings on success and goal setting and interpersonal skills and things like that, all the basic success skills that people run across. I started doing that back in the 1970s, and my life was turning around. But one thing that didn't turn around was my physical fitness. Yes. And I'd never been an athlete, and I never was a superior student in school, except maybe in grammar school. And I weighed almost 200 pounds, 199 and a half, and I was unwilling to go the extra half. But I'm only 5'9". And I've got a small frame. So 199 or 200 pounds on this is quite a bit of excess baggage. And I had never run a mile. I had never done anything other than maybe lift weights. That was the extent of my fitness activity.
Yes.
And so I decided in 1976, and yes, I get it that was ancient history, like the Egyptian pyramids to some people, but still ancient history.
Yes.
For me, 1976, I was, having been born in 46, I'll save you the math, I'm 70. I was 30 years old.
Yes.
I was working at the Little Rock, Arkansas Urban Renewal Agency. I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I was making $525 a month. And I was overweight, out of shape, smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And I joined the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and I started doing all this goal setting and going to these classes and reading these books and all. And got Earl Nightingale's recordings and listened to those. And so everything's starting to work in my life except for the fitness thing. And I said, I know I need to exercise and I'd like to become a runner, but I can't do that. I've tried it and my lungs burn and my legs ache and it's just miserable. And some days the weather's not good, so I don't think I'll do that. And I kept thinking about it. I said, what could I get myself to do?
Yes.
I could get myself to put on my running shoes and step out the door.
There you go.
People look at me and they go, like that's going to help. Well, now think about it. If your inclination is to become a runner, and you haven't really committed to it yet, but you want to show up for the game, so to speak, then if you merely commit to opening the jar to get that first olive out, right? If you merely commit to putting on your running shoes and walking out the front door, you can go back inside and eat ice cream all night.
Yes.
You can be a couch potato, but at least you went out that front door. Well, most of the time when you get out there, you're going to say, well, heck, I'm out here. I might as well go to the corner.
Exactly.
And you run down to the corner and you get a little winded and you say, well, I'll walk for a block, and it just starts accumulating. Exactly. What happened was by cracking the egg that way, by getting myself to commit to an unreasonable level of must do on putting on the running shoes. Meaning I did it when it was raining. I did it when it was snow and wind. I did it when I'd forgotten and it was almost midnight, and I would put on my running shoes, walk outside, touch the curb, go back inside and take them off, go to bed. But I did it every single day for, pause, 5 years.
5 years, wow.
5 years. Within the first few months, I got comfortable running half a mile.
Yes.
And as I stayed after it, showing up each day, doing my little must put on the running shoes and walk outside before this day is gone.
Yeah.
As I committed to that and checked it off each day, I found myself running ultimately 5 miles a day and got in the best shape of my life, dropped 52 pounds.
Amazing.
And my waist went from probably 38. I wore a 36, but you know, it was always like that to get it fastened. So it's probably a 38. Down to 30, and that was at age 30. It's now 40 years later, and I still have a 30-inch waist.
That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. A fantastic entree, because I wanted us to focus this portion on motivation, and I wanted people to hear this story because you're really talking about a very small win that has amazing impact for the long term, right?
Absolutely.
You know, so I think I'd love for us to then, you know, you definitely have a lot of motivation principles in the book. I think there's, you know, a big number of them, and I'd like you maybe pick the ones you think are the big nuggets. You think you talk about 68 ways.
Yeah.
Maybe pick your top 5 and share them with the audience.
You bet. I've got 68 in the book, the Self-Motivation Handbook, and you can go to selfmotivationhandbook.com or cathcart.com to see the details on it.
Yes.
In it, I've got 336 ways to motivate yourself, 68 in the first part, and then 200 and change after that.
Yes.
And each one's about 1 minute long, if that, to read it, right? And there's simple things, like make it easy. For example, I kept my running shoes near my front door.
Yes.
We think, you're going to put running shoes by your front? Yeah. Yes, I am, because it was not about making my living room look perfect.
Exactly.
It was about getting me fit so I could live there for a long time.
There you
right?
go. Yeah, exactly.
So I didn't put them out in the way. I put them behind a chair, but they were there. So that every day when I thought about it, I thought, well, okay, I'll just do it right now. And I'd put them on, and sometimes I wouldn't be dressed for exercise. I'd just put on the shoes, walk outside, walk back inside, check.
Yes.
And then if I got relaxed a little later, I'd do something else. Well, motivation is about making it easy for yourself to take the first step. For example, get used to keeping the numbers you want to call handy on your desktop, on your, you know, in your easily accessed files or wherever, you know, so you can just click onto a list and click dial. And now, oh my God, I'm making a sales call. What am I going to do? You know, so you do the next step.
Yeah.
You get good at each of those next steps and just take it that way. Another thing is regularly reflect on what you're good at and not particularly good at.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a what I call the sales IQ assessment that I co-authored with Dr. Tony Alessandra and Jeffrey Gittimer.
Yes.
And it's an online assessment, and it walks people through each of those 8 aspects of selling, you know, preparation, targeting, connecting, et cetera, and asks some questions that drills down and has them assess which of those areas are they currently good at and which ones do they need to get better at.
Yes.
And if there's something you're not particularly good at and never have been, find resources or other people to help you with it, or software or something, right?
Yeah.
So don't try to become great at what you're not great at necessarily, but find a way to be better, you know? Another is have reminders around yourself. You know, fill your environment with encouragement. And if it's not people who encourage you, then make it things that encourage you. Reminders of past successes or you know, motivational slogans or some kind of a tool. And when you get in your car, always make that learning time. So listen to the recording from Success Magazine, or listen to somebody's podcast, or, you know, have the top 1% sellers factory content there where you can load it in and it's playing while you're driving along on your way to a sales contact, or just while you're driving along.
Exactly. Yeah.
I did that for many, many years. My family didn't particularly enjoy it as much as I did, but they knew, my wife and son, they knew that I needed to change my own thinking. I needed to reframe my belief system and my understanding of the world. And so they tolerated a few years of me listening to motivational materials every time I got in the car.
Yes.
And it wasn't always direct motivation. Sometimes it was just some business leader speaking or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was always a learning experience while I was driving along. And the net effect was it transformed me, or allowed me to transform me.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And when you then look at motivation, especially for sales managers who are working for big enterprises, a lot of the time they're actually managing a sales team,
Yeah.
and they need to make sure that they are managing them and motivating them. What advice do you give them to then be conscious of what's happening, and if motivation starts to go down, how they can basically kind of keep it at a level that will help them essentially get the commitment from the client, not close the sale, as you said.
There you go. Yeah, confirm the sale.
Yes.
That's the thing. You literally are not closing anything. You're confirming it.
Yes.
I'm going to confirm that you're buying. You're going to confirm that I'm going to provide this to you for this price. So it doesn't close anything, but people will still use the term, so fine. But just get it that it's about confirming.
Exactly.
I've managed a number of sales teams over the years, and there was one in particular where I think I learned more than I did anywhere else, and that was the Tulsa Oklahoma agency of Mass Mutual Life Insurance.
Yes.
I was with them for 6 years. Had 19 salespeople, and though we had some turnover, it stayed about 19 during those 6 years. And we went from an agency that the company was thinking about shutting down to being the agency that won the President's Trophy twice in a 5-year period. Wow. Out of 125 agencies. And the other agencies started flying into Tulsa to study what we were doing, to see, what's this wonderful new thing you're doing.
Yes.
And when I was managing the salespeople, and this is to all of those who are watching or listening to us who are sales leaders,
yes.
And they have a team. Remember, you cannot motivate a team. You can only motivate the individuals that comprise the team.
Mm-hmm.
And each person is motivated separately. So it might be that all that motivation happens at the same time because they're all in one room or one experience, but it's happening separately for each individual. So you don't motivate Ash the way you motivate Jim.
Yes.
What Ash thinks is motivating might be a pep talk and a let's go get 'em Tiger kind of a message, yeah. Whereas Jim thinks it's seeing the path to the goal more clearly and having more faith in his ability to fulfill the steps. Whereas another person might feel that a little personal reassurance with an arm around the shoulder would be the most motivating thing. And another person sees some big reward with a celebration at the end as the most motivating thing. So here's how to think about motivation.
Yes.
Motive plus action. Mm-hmm. A motive without action is just a dream or a fantasy.
Yes.
Action without a motive is just random behavior. Mm-hmm. So how do you motivate someone? Find out what their motive. You don't bring motives to people. You find motives in people.
Yes.
That's big. You don't bring motives to people. You find motives in them.
Yeah.
And then you stimulate action on those motives, and then they're motivated. So that's the way that whole thing works.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a very interesting point you just made. You can't really motivate them. You find out what intrinsically they need to do, maybe accomplish their own lives, and then be able to talk to that and help direct that forward.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Jim.
By the way, there's a resource on cathcart.com. Yes. If you scroll down the page, and by the way, I sent you the link so you can post it on Top Sellers. But it's a sketch video, 3-minute sketch video, where the hand is drawing and they're narrating.
Yes.
And it's on my book, the Self-Motivation Handbook, and it makes these very points, yes. Motive plus action, etc. So it's a fun little cartoon thing to watch for 3 minutes.
Wonderful. We'll definitely share a lot of the links you sent me with the audience, and also on LinkedIn as well, to make sure as many people out there as possible get access to the amazing content you have.
Thank you.
Which I was impressed when I look at other speakers. They don't have the wherewithal sometimes to get all of that rich content out, but you've done an amazing job getting a lot of that out, which is fantastic. Fantastic, Jim. As I mentioned, this is a third segment. We're going to focus it on really bringing everything we just talked about so far together, especially when it comes to the whole aspect of communicating and presenting. And for sales professionals, they do this all the time, day in, day out. Sometimes it's one-on-one. Sometimes it's a group setting. A lot of enterprise sellers sometimes have to present to board of directors at the customer organizations. So I would really love for people to get Jim's best advice in this area. And I know within 15 minutes, it's not a lot, but let's start with, from your own experience, what you think makes a big difference for Jim when Jim is communicating, whether it's one-on-one or to a group.
Well, I've been a professional speaker for 41 years, 40 plus, and I've done 3,000 presentations around the world, and they've ranged in size from a small group of a half dozen people to big groups of 13,000 people at once. And they've been short and they've been long. Last year, I did a series of lectures in China for 1,000 people at a time, 6 hours a day, 2 days in a row, in Chengdu, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Taipei, Taiwan. Oh my gosh, so I've done every kind of presentation you can imagine, including making sales presentations in a boardroom or a committee, making sales presentations in a webinar or through an online presentation to a group where I can see the group in the distance on screen, and they can just see me, the talking head. I do about 3 interviews or webinars or podcasts a week. Every week. So, I've got thousands of experiences of different types of presentations. Yes. And I've written a book on it that'll be coming out later this year or next year. Fantastic. It's called What to Do When You're the Speaker. Yes. And, I've got a course called Confident Communication for Public Speaking and Leading Meetings. So in other words, there's a lot of depth there.
Exactly.
And I've been the president of many organizations where I ran board meetings and such.
Yes.
So the principles are the same. Nobody is motivated or influenced in tandem with another person. They are influenced individually. So they're all making their own independent decisions. Now, it may be that the group has a collective assumption among them that something is good or bad or desirable or whatever. Yes. And you can build off of that. But you got to remember that across the kitchen table, mom and dad are making 2 independent decisions. They're just going to agree on it at the end, right?
Yes.
So you don't sell to mom the way you sell to dad. In the boardroom, you don't sell to the CEO the way you sell to the advisory board member who's there for the day.
Yes.
Right? So what you've got to find out in every case for a presentation is, why would they care what I've got to say?
Very good point.
I want to say that twice because that's a big deal.
Yes.
Why should they even care what you have to say on this subject? And when you're doing an introduction of a speaker, the classic formula is, why is this speaker speaking at this time on this topic to this group? Right?
Very good point.
So it answers that question. People ask me, do you ever get nervous before a speech? Only if I don't understand why they would care to learn about what I've got to say.
Got it, yes.
So there you go. It all comes back to, what do you want? Same thing as you on an individual basis. What do they want? What are they concerned about? What are they afraid of? What is it that's bothering them? Where's the pain? Where's the pleasure? What are they dreaming of? What do they wish, if only? The better you can do your upfront research, the better that presentation could go. Number 2, and these are just hitting major points.
Right.
Tell the blinking truth.
Yes.
In other words, when you're there talking to them, don't get an A in speech class.
Right.
Tell them the truth. If you come in there and something obvious is distracting everybody, comment on it and brush it aside for the moment and focus on the topic.
Yes.
Like if a room's on fire, you don't just go on presenting.
Right.
You say, hey, why don't we step outside, where we can smell the smoke but not feel the heat, and I'll tell you the rest of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
By the way, on a number of occasions, I have personally had to evacuate the entire audience. One time it was 700 people
Wow.
from two levels below the street in a convention hotel when the hotel caught on fire.
Wow.
I've had to go outdoors with a group when it was freezing cold in the snow outside, but we had to evacuate the building for some reason, usually a fire alarm.
Yes.
I've had rooms where it was 200 degrees or it felt like it, and everybody's sitting there just
dying. Yeah.
Really? We got to listen to a speaker? Come on, somebody open a window. You know, I've been in rooms where someone came. I was in a room one time presenting to a sales team, and a guy came in and said, President Reagan's been shot.
Wow. Yes. Yes.
Well, hey, that'll distract them.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
And we stopped and we talked about that, and we made a decision as a group as to whether we would only go focus on that or finish talking about this.
Yes.
Because you can't just impose that on them.
Absolutely.
You know, I've spoken to a group immediately after 9/11, a few days later, in New York on Long Island.
Wow.
And wow, I mean, hey, whoa, different mindset and emotion set.
Absolutely.
I've been in a room where the room went dark, electricity went off, and we're all in pitch black.
Yes.
And this was in Kansas City. I was speaking to a group of people that sell greeting card displays for retail establishments.
Yes.
It was a greeting card company. And we're all sitting there in total darkness. And I said, would someone near the wall please open the door and leave it open so we get a little bit of light in here from outside?
Yes.
And somebody did. And I said, would someone else please check to see if this is an emergency or an inconvenience? Because if it's an emergency, we'll evacuate, and I'll lead you since I've got a mic.
Yes. Exactly.
And the mic was strangely still working, though the lights didn't.
Yeah.
And they checked, and the people stayed in the room, and I said, okay, here's your choice. We can either go out in the hallway and loiter until the lights come back on, or I can finish my point in 10 or 15 minutes in the dark.
Yes.
You'll learn the ideas, and then we're done for the day. Which do you prefer? They said, speak in the dark.
Well,
So I did, and I finished my talk.
Yeah.
So tell the truth, for heaven's sakes. In other words, be you. Don't try to be some perfect thing that's going to get your speech teacher to be impressed.
Yes.
And well, should I have notes? Well, do you need them? Yeah. Well, then have notes. Should I look at my notes or hide them and glance at them out of the corner of my eye? Well, would you trust somebody that was glancing out of the corner of their eye?
No, exactly.
No. So pick up your notes and hold them in your hand and just say, wait a minute, there's something. Oh, yeah. Let me read this to you. And then you just read them exactly what's on the page if you need to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Be real. Why? Because that's who people trust.
Yes. Very good point. And they are little things, but they can definitely make a huge difference between an experienced professional and one who's just basically still very junior.
Yeah, and people can go to my YouTube channel, Jim Cathcart, one word.
Yes.
And see all kinds of videos of speeches I've done.
Yes.
And they're all free. But one in particular, I was speaking for Toastmasters International at their 2001 meeting, and I had 1,500 people in the audience. And these are speech specialists, you know, Toastmasters International. Yes. So they teach speaking. They are very, very conscious of what you're doing, how you're saying it, everything else, you know, the way you stand. And so I got up on stage, happily shook the hand of the president who introduced me. And then I said, Madam Chairperson, international directors, ladies and gentlemen, you know, I did the protocol.
Yes.
But then I said, welcome. And I just started, you know, being me in front of them, and we laughed together and we learned together and got a standing screaming ovation at the end of it. And at one point during the thing, I asked my son to stand up and hold up my 6-month-old grandson who was there with him.
Yes.
And he held him up, and he got a standing ovation
as well
at age 6 months.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I think it's fantastic that you're sharing all of this with us, and I really love it, because the other thing that I want us to hopefully also listen from you is that you've been around trying to persuade other people for a long time. And I think for sellers, this whole idea of being able to convince, persuade, and get people to confirm the sale and commit to it, sometimes it's a far-fetched idea for some people and they struggle with it. And specifically also when you're doing large deals where the persuasion task is distributed over a number of players, right?
Yeah. Enterprise sales, yeah.
In a very large sales. So how do you manage that? What is your own view on how people get persuaded, and then how do you then help the sellers sort of execute a plan towards that?
Well, the man who's known for the word persuasion is Robert Cialdini, Cialdini, and he's got some good books on influence and persuasion. Yeah. But when you're persuading a group, a dispersed group, in different committees and departments and things like that, what I found helpful is to identify the moving parts. In other words, which departments are going to be involved in this decision process, and who at each stage along the way makes the decision. Yes. Because there's one guy, there's one gal, one person in each committee or in each department who is the one that's the go or no go switch thrower, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the more you can understand that, the better off you are. When you don't have a way of knowing that, then you just have to make assumptions and test your assumptions.
Yes.
By taking the best obvious path. But I like to have a chart of some sort that I create showing all the moving parts, and then I can look at which should come first. And what is the sort of the overriding concern that brought them to the table in the first place, to even be looking at such a proposal as mine, right? And then, you got to be careful, because you have to deliver in the way you want them to receive. One of my clients makes multi-million-dollar sales in the oil and energy exploration industry.
Yes.
And years ago, they had put together a RFP, request for proposal. They'd put together a bid package. This is not it. Yes. It was a big fancy thing like this that was custom designed with their logo on the cover, and it was made out of plastic and a special textured plastic with a snap right here. And they had this beautiful, wonderful proposal inside, and they had submitted this in multiple numbers to all the various stakeholders that would be in on the decision.
The decision, yeah.
And they knew they were being considered as one of maybe a dozen that are making proposals.
Yes.
Well, I'll cut the story short. They found that they weren't getting the deals. And when they went in and said, why? They said, I don't know, you had a good proposal, and your ideas and your pricing was right. Well, then the guy said, well, let's look at your proposal. And he picked up the proposal,
yes,
but it didn't have this big, beautiful binder. Someone had taken snips and cut the binder off. Oh. And all it had was the spine with a ragged edge on it.
Yes.
And then the loose pages in a ring binder effect inside.
Of course.
And my client said, oh my God, what have you done to our beautiful package?
Yes.
He said, oh, we had to do that because we stack all the proposals together, and yours was an odd size and it wouldn't fit the stack. So yes, in order to have it in the stack, we had to snip off that beautiful exterior.
Yes.
Well, no wonder he lost. It looks like a piece of trash.
Wow. Yes.
So, tens of thousands of dollars spent to do the right thing ended up being the wrong thing, because that's not how they process it.
Yes.
Years ago, I was trying to get all the speakers bureaus in the country to have a better file on me.
Yes.
So I found out what their files looked like by visiting a lot of speakers bureaus.
Yes.
And then I designed a Jim Cathcart file that was complete and didn't need them to create a file. They could just drop it in and it would fit right with the others.
A consistent template and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And today that same file would be called my website.
Yes.
Exactly. But this was in the 1990s when nobody had a website.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you're actually making the point about something that's a whole lot more critical, which is understand how persuasion or decisions are made by the client, typically how they like to be sold as much as possible, and then use this knowledge to then help you look at the stakeholders, where the decision makers are, and then be able to really develop that campaign that will help you at the very end to get that
confirmation. It may be that you need to influence a number of people who influence other people who make the ultimate decision, but it's really helpful to ask multiple times of multiple stakeholders, how are decisions like this typically made in this organization?
Exactly. Unpacking the decision-making process.
Yeah.
And let's kind of cap it off, Jim, with when you talked about some physical things happening in the environment where you were speaking, but I'd love to also see if you are, let's say, in a boardroom, you're trying to make that sale, and then you get a curveball at you from one of the board members.
Yeah.
You've seen some of those examples. If you can share with us some of those.
Well, I always stop and ask myself, what's under what was just said?
Yes.
So someone says, Jim, this is obviously not going to work because blank, and let's say blank is untrue, whatever it is that they just said. And I say, well, Ash, if that were true, you'd be right. But the reason that comes up is this, and that's why the point you just made won't matter or apply in this situation. And then I'd go on and make my case. So in other words, don't handle objections, address concerns. You say it's just a play on words. No, it's not. If someone objects to buying from you, you're already adversaries.
Right.
Your Honor, I object. We should not buy from this person, right? You don't address them while they're still concerns. And if you know, and you usually do, what the concerns typically are. Right,
exactly.
You might say, ladies and gentlemen, the primary concerns with something like this are, one, is this technology reliable? I mean, is it really proven? Can it last? Will it stand up under tough circumstances and changes?
Exactly, yeah.
And then you put that down, and you're going to address that. Another is this a reasonable price? I mean, does it make sense to commit this kind of dollars to something like this? We're certainly going to explore that because that's a vital feature. Another is, are we the kind of people you can depend on to be there even when the weather turns bad on this?
Yes.
So I'm going to address that too. What additional concerns do you have that I might need to address today in this presentation?
Yeah, very bravely addressing those on the front end and then asking for additional things. Yeah.
Or they say, well, what about, we've been with XYZ for 20 years now.
Yes.
If we change over, we're going to lose efficiency and it's going to cost us money and so on and so forth. Thank you for that. Absolutely. The conversion process needs to be seamless, and I'll address that.
Absolutely. Wonderful, Jim.
Yeah.
I am actually going to request of you to help us close this out by taking us back to the whole concept that you talked several times about, which is the whole idea of, what do you want your legacy to be, the future you want to build. You told a very good story in one of your talks about this gentleman that basically took, from one individual working at a dealership to becoming an owner of several dealerships himself, the gentleman that drove the car with you one time. But maybe, just explain to people that concept and how it can actually help people when times are hard to remember where they're going.
You bet. There's a daily question that I propose that people should keep in front of them, and that is, how would the person I'd like to become do the things I'm about to do? In other words, if I'm going to a meeting today, I don't need to go into that meeting, or I shouldn't go into that meeting thinking like I used to be.
Yes.
I ought to think about, okay, if I want to be the international sales leader, if I want to be the most respected or one of the most respected professionals in my field in this, how would that person, me, not someone else, but me at that level, do this maybe a little differently than I'm going to do it today?
Yes.
And it'll cause you to be a little bit more prepared, a little bit more mature, a little bit more, this ain't my first rodeo. In other words, I've I've dealt with this before, and I can handle it. So you're not deer in the headlights when a surprising question comes up. A little bit more confident, a little bit more poised, but that's the whole point. How would the person you'd like to be, the better you, the more advanced, the more sophisticated you, how would that version of you do what you're about to do today? And with that daily question, you can transform your life.
Yeah, I loved when I heard that the first time, and I'm glad that we brought it up.
Thank you.
And it's fantastic. I'm glad we closed our conversation on it. Jim, it's been an amazing pleasure. I think the Top 1% Sellers Academy is going to be a better place, a better source of amazing content for sellers because you've joined us. I'm very grateful for you being here. I will definitely share with our audience all the different resources you mentioned and even more, because I think that it's just an amazing resource you have on your website, as well as your books and your videos. I'm very glad that you're able to join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here, and I appreciate the privilege.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you very much for attending. We'll definitely be posting a lot of this content across a number of sites, the Top 1% Sellers Academy, which is launching in a few weeks, as well as also LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. So definitely please share. As you heard Jim talk, it's really more about sharing a lot of that positivity, which will bring a lot of goodness into your own sales career and in your life as well. Jim, thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Top 1% Sellers podcast. Give us your suggestions and guest recommendations by emailing us at ash@connectwithash.com. Thank you also for sharing this podcast with your colleagues and social media contacts. To connect with us on LinkedIn, please send a connect request to ash@connectwithash.com. See you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.